Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Paddy in the studio.
And it's Laura in the studio.
And it's Henry at home.
Henry, you were watching at home this parade of politicians after a couple of days of incredibly newsy political news. What was the main thing that you gleaned, or what did you think was the most interesting thing from this morning?
The Reform UK have the two-party double act that has ruled Westminster politics for more than 100 years on the run. They are all talking about how they deal with what happened on Thursday and the results that came through on Friday. I know there are people out there who quite legitimately take the view that we are getting overexcited by what happened to Reform UK on Thursday, that this actually isn't that different from the Brexit Party winning the European elections in 2019 or UKIP having won them in 2014. All I will say is that is very clearly, from private conversations and from the way in which the politicians were behaving in your programmes today, not the way in which these results are being interpreted by Labour and the Conservatives. They are interpreting this as a serious threat to the way in which politics has happened in this country for as long as anyone can remember.
We spoke to Professor Rob Ford, who said on this projection, it's not even that the Conservatives could be the party of opposition for a few years. It could be that they got the fifth party.
The fifth party. So Justine Greening, former Cabinet Minister of the Tory party, who is fair to say was unhappy with the direction of travel under Boris Johnson and sort of on from that point. She said this morning the current iteration of the Conservative Party is finished, which, considering that she was in the Conservative Party for a long, long time and in the Cabinet as a Conservative Cabinet Minister, is quite something to hear.
A year ago, Rishi Sunak was still Prime Minister.
What? Gosh, that seems like a very long time ago. So this morning, Reform chose to put their chair, Zia Yusuf, out for interview, which was interesting in and of itself. He is somebody who's responsible for having built a machine that has just won lots and lots and lots and lots of elections. Getting the money with the help of Nick Candy, the Treasurer, spending lots of money, but also, really pulling off a massive success, even before we get to whether or not he's going to last. But it's incredible political achievement. He was the man that Reform decided to put out today for interview, and we wanted to test him in the way that we would the other parties on the promises that they'd made to people during the campaign. But before we hear some of that, Henry, what do we know about Zia Yusuf, who's now, he's a major political player in the country?
Well, yeah, and you talk about Rishi Sunak having been Prime Minister a year ago. Not to talk down either of your knowledge of the concierge industry, but I don't think a year ago any of us three knew who Zia Yusuf was. It was early in the general election campaign where he suddenly made a big donation to Reform, emerged as a public figure. I mentioned the concierge industry because he made his money in 2023, I think it was, by selling a concierge app that he had developed for tens of millions of pounds. Before that, he worked at Goldman Sachs. He was also a Conservative Party member. Zia Yusuf is also a British Muslim, and I think in the context of Reform's immigration policy, that is obviously relevant because of the very intense debate that there often is about Reform's views on immigration. Obviously, some of their critics say that their immigration policy is hardline. Reform would say they merely have legitimate concerns about immigration, as do many of their voters, as do indeed, they would say, many voters who don't even vote for them.
Yeah, it's interesting that he said and has made a point of saying that. So this morning, we wanted to test out the various things that they promised people during the council election. They promised that they were going to save lots of money at local councils by driving out waste. And they've also told people that they will reject migrants from the areas where Reform is now in charge. And when I say migrants, I mean people arriving from small boats, people who come into the country illegally. But when you do the checking about what actually's gone on, those asylum hotels are the products of contracts between the Home Office and accommodation providers. Local councils can't just suddenly shut them down. So we wanted to know how Reform would actually stick to the pledge they've made, which is to try to close those hotels and keep those hotels from opening in the areas they now represent.
There are a number of instruments at our disposal, which our teams are working. We've only just won the election, right?
So what we're going to be doing in Reform Control Council, this is our commitment. We will use every instrument available to us. And those include things like injunctions, those include things like judicial reviews, those include things like actually enforcing the planning laws, because we think a lot of these changes that are being made are in violation of a number of these laws. And we're going to look at budget reallocation
Your new
as well.
mayor in Greater Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins, said asylum seekers should go in tents. Is that now the party policy?
That's what France does. Do you think that's unreasonable?
Is that not
And
the
do you think
party's
that's a reason
policy?
why? Do you think that's a reason why? Do you think that's a reason why people come across the English Channel? They risk their lives coming across the English Channel to come to the UK because we're a soft touch, Laura.
It's interesting, when I went to Dover a year or so ago and met protesters who are fed up with small boat arrivals, the thing that really annoys them is that on arrival they go into a hotel paid for by the state. That's one of the things. So that wherever, and hence the reason the Conservatives used the barge down in Portland, because they knew that voters, if they don't like arrivals by boats, they like it even less that they go into hotels.
But the Conservative previous government signed contracts with 3 big accommodation providers that don't have a break clause even until 2029. So if reform councils now, like Kent County Council, obviously, as you said, in Dover, people have lots of concerns. It's the county that's probably affected more by illegal immigration than any other part of England. If they don't like it, actually, the question is, how are they going to go about closing these hotels or accommodating migrants somewhere else? And I think it's fair to say, Henry, that from Zia Yusuf, we didn't really get a clear answer. You could hear him say, oh, there's instruments at our disposal and we'll work it out. But they're going to have to make this big transition from being successful campaigners to administrators in charge of things.
Yeah, they don't have an answer to how they're going to stop that. And it's very hard to see what that answer could be, as you pointed out. And I guess the political question, if you assume that they can't, as the local mayor or local council leader, stop migrants being housed in a particular hotel, I think the political question then is, does the local electorate, seeing reform setting themselves against the national government on this issue, actually warm to reform even more because they're standing up for them? Or do they say, well, in local government, you clearly are not passing the test of doing the things that you said you would do, and therefore we distrust you as much as we distrust the parties who in national government have, those people would say, let them down. I think which way people feel about that, I think, is a really important question for the shape of British politics over the next few years.
100%, because you hear people in the big parties go, well, they're going to have a record and they're going to be scrutinised. Therefore, is their assumption that if their things go badly, then they'll get the blame. Well, actually, that's not necessarily going to be the case. A, they might do it well. We've just got no idea. I suppose the reality is probably like some councils will be well run and some won't, right? But we don't know how they'll do. B, even when things are hard, politicians can quite often turn that to their advantage. So if you look at, for example, what the SNP did so successfully in Scotland for a long time, when things didn't go their way on the things that they were in charge of, they very often used it as a campaigning mechanism to say, well, that's why we need more power.
I was listening to Saturday's newscast, which was very good. And the guest, Luke Trill, said the British public voted for change. If you look at the way the election result went in 2016, they then joined up in mass to put Jeremy Corbyn, trampoline Jeremy Corbyn. They voted for change in 2019. They voted for change in 2024 with Keir Starmer. So the link between the future record of reform, which you've just been talking about, and the past voting appeal for change is, say I, delivery.
Yeah.
And I think this is the only view I've got that's worth repeating. If you're in office and you don't change anything or deliver what you've promised, push off.
That's what the voters say. But there's a question about, even if you are delivering things and getting things done, can you communicate that sufficiently so that people actually will come back to you? And that's maybe an issue that Labour's got. It was, I thought, an unusually downbeat Wes Streeting, I thought, on TV this morning. I don't know how it was with you on the wireless, but on TV at least, he was very much in a kind of please be patient mode, rather than, he's often very sort of ebullient and very kind of bouncy, and he's known as being a very good communicator in Westminster. And I thought his tone this morning was quite downbeat, sort of, please give us more time.
We know, the Prime Minister knows this, that's why he's talked about the need to make progress further and faster. that unless people feel this country has changed and changed for the better at the next general election, people will look for change elsewhere. We know that.
Henry, Diane Abbott tweeted or posted in the week that they say they want to go further and faster, number 10, without realising that the direction's the problem, not the depth or speed. Do you think there is a rift in Labour that is serious? Is it the same rift that we've been reporting in Labour for the last 50 years?
I think rift is a bit strong, but I have been surprised by the breadth of frustration and in some quarters anger with the government from Labour MPs who do not generally agree with Diane Abbott or whoever else on the left of the Labour Party about very much at all. That really struck me on Friday. Now, of course, Friday was not going to ever be a day for cool heads because Labour politicians were dealing with the emotional reality of these results as they were coming in. But nevertheless, the number of Labour MPs I had who were really very critical of things that Downing Street, and I say Downing Street because I mean numbers 10 and 11, Dharma and Rachel Reeves, have done. And for so many of them, they say it became clear on the doors, not just in Runcorn, but around England, that the original sin of this government was the cut to the winter fuel allowance.
You hear that all the time.
All the time.
One Labour MP on the right of the Labour Party said to me on Friday, why don't they just reverse it? It doesn't even raise that much money. Why don't they just reverse it and say that they've listened? I don't think that's on the cards at all, but it's not something that I expected to hear on Thursday morning. It gives you a sense of how Labour people are digesting those results.
Okay.
And remember, there's still the vote to come on the controversial benefits decisions. Now, Labour's majority is so massive, they are not going to lose that vote.
Okay.
Let's be clear about that. But you may well see that becoming a moment where Labour MPs try to communicate their disaffection. But the consolation for Labour, and I do think there's a very important distinction between them and the Conservatives, is that it is in their hands to fix their political predicament. They are the government. They have the levers of power at their disposal. They can find ways to deal with the reform threat. And by the way, we may well see future sets of local elections, given the different geographical way in which they break down, the threat for Labour to their left as well, from the Greens and the Liberal Democrats.
Unusually for you, you left something out, Henry. They have got the levers and they've got time.
They do.
They've got 4 years. So anyway, let's turn our eyes to the Conservative Party because everyone said, where is Kemi Badenoch? And the answer, it seems to be, on Laura Kuenssberg's sofa. After the election, how long did we have to wait till she appeared on broadcast?
It was quite a long time. She turned up in the Tories' spot of rare success. The Peterborough and Cambridgeshire mayor, Paul Bristow, was elected there, the former MP. So she turned up to that.
You've still got this in your head, haven't you? After 24 hours of on-air broadcast.
Pictures, yes. Paul Bristow, Peterborough and Cambridgeshire mayor, former mayor, former MP, lost his seat, I think, by about 450 votes or something like that this time around. But yeah, so Kemi Badenoch was with us this morning. And, you know, the Tory party, to use a word that I don't use very often, the Tory party got mullered on Thursday. They got absolutely mullered. This was really, really dreadful for them. And the point we were trying to get her to address is that the performance of the Conservative Party has got worse since she was in charge. So, yes, of course, her whole pitch is that we got things wrong when we were in government. There were things we should have done differently on immigration. There were things we should have done differently on the economy. She's got a long list of things that she's very happy to talk about. Her analysis of all the shambles in government, which is why people were so cross with the Conservatives and booted out Rishi Sunak. What she did not appear to want to talk about at all or really even reflect on is anything that she might have been getting wrong or not doing well enough or want to do differently, given how badly the party did on Thursday. And her shtick, Henry, that this is all about protest, I think there's a risk there that it sounds a bit like she's sort of in denial about how bad things are.
Yeah, I think there is. And she said I think this was the phrase she used. She said the Conservative Party will recover under her in a slow and steady way. It was something like that. And I just don't think that her MPs, her much depleted parliamentary party, will think that that's going to cut it. I think there is a real frustration from Conservative MPs that she doesn't necessarily understand the depth of their problem. The sense that this might actually be a structural fault at the heart of the Conservative Party that has been revealed. Structural weakness, I should say, at the heart of the Conservative Party that's been revealed by these results. That said, the dog that did not bark at any point since Thursday evening was any sense of challenge over her leadership. And remember, she's only been leader of the Conservative Party for 6 months. I think, as far as the Conservatives in Westminster were concerned, the biggest moment of Friday was when Robert Jenrick said to you that she was doing a bleep good job. I don't know whether I can use a word on Newscast that Robert Jenrick used on BBC One. Anyway,
I think you can. You can say bloody good job.
There you go. That was quite a moment. But I think if they don't see some faster evidence from Kemi Badenoch that she gets how big a problem they're in, then before long those leadership rumblings will start.
This is what she said had been going on.
When I came in, I said it was likely to get worse before it got better. And protest is in the air. What we had was Labour saying, all we need to do is get rid of the Conservatives and everything will be better. Things got worse. Now we have Reform saying, all we need to do is get rid of the Conservatives and Labour and everything will be better. I suspect things will get worse. But protest is in the air.
Yes, I mean, that was what Keir Starmer said a few months ago, things can only get worse, the opposite of 1997.
Yes.
And voters want to be given a tune to hum.
They do.
A shining city on the hill.
They do.
Is there a way back for Boris Johnson, Henry Zeffman?
I would never discount the possibility that if the Conservatives are in a real nightmare at some point nearer to the next general election, they might send for Boris Johnson. But it is worth remembering, isn't it, that at least what many Conservatives think is the big problem for them is that after Brexit, they had a much more generous immigration policy than many of the people who'd voted for Brexit wanted. And that was under Boris Johnson's prime ministership. In some online right circles, it's now known as the Boris wave of immigration. And I do think Nigel Farage would not exactly struggle to put that at the heart of a debate if Boris Johnson did come back.
Let's be straight, though, about what is going on in the Tory party. Yes, there is no appetite beyond the odd person. And there was one former council leader who said Kemi Badenoch ought to resign. But there's not widespread appetite at all to push her. Somebody who was in the cabinet so recently said to me yesterday, it would be ridiculous. They used that word. It would be ridiculous because they had more prime ministers than the number of times they changed their pants between 2019 and, actually I shouldn't say that, it was going to be mildly funny, but it came out all wrong. I mean, it's said very plainly by pretty much everyone you talk to, it's a nonsense to think that just changing the leader would be the answer here. Let's also be very candid with newscasters. There are plenty of conversations in Tory circles in Westminster about whether or not she's still going to be there. Is it the case that this time next year, after a set of mega elections in England, Wales and Scotland, will they have to think about replacing her there? And I've been told about all sorts of kind of weird and wacky suggestions of ways that she might be moved on or other people might come in. Or is there indeed, as Henry suggests, you can never write off completely the chances of Boris Johnson coming back to the Conservative Party in one way or another? Or even someone suggested to me, and these are kind of, notional conversations, okay? I'm not suggesting these are plots afoot in any way, shape or form. But someone suggested to me maybe there could even be a call for David Cameron. There are conversations in Westminster about what to do about the leadership. I don't mean in any way, shape or form current plots to get rid of Kemi Badenoch, but is the notion of who should be the leader and should it still be her in a few years' time a live one? Yes, it is.
I don't know any Conservatives who think and will say to me that Kemi Badenoch is doing a good job. Do you?
No, I know plenty of people saying she's sort of doing okay in hellish circumstances, but I've never heard anybody say, oh, it's so great, it's going brilliantly. What you do get is people remarking on how they seem to have moved on from an era when every time you opened a newspaper, every time you listened to Newscast, our notebooks would be absolutely full of Tories slagging each other off. We've moved on from that situation. She has managed to sort of keep a lid on all that sort of infighting that became their brand, frankly. But maybe that's also because there's apathy, which could be even more deadly.
I think what will happen is the very clever people will say that in 2016, the Brexit referendum changed our politics. It removed the old certainties. The parties were changed. They didn't all know it was coming. The Conservatives put everyone in the Conservative Party as Prime Minister while they cycled through all the options of what the Conservative right looked like. Then along came a new version of the right, making it very hard to be the Conservative Party if you've got someone trying to be more conservative than you are.
And I think a very senior Tory said to me yesterday on the phone, somebody from the kind of centre-right bit of the party said that we have to tell people who we're for. Like, who are we trying to get to vote for
What
us?
are we for?
What are we for? But also, who are we for? So you get Ed Davey, for example, saying overtly, we are the party of Middle England. Well, who used to be the party of Middle England? The Conservatives. And when Ed Davey was on the programme this morning, I mean, it was almost comically Middle England. He was in a beautiful, the leafiest image I've ever seen in my life, surrounded by leaves. He was in Dorset, and the bird song was almost louder than him. And this glorious sort of Middle England. Yeah, well, we can hear the bird song. We should probably have listened to what he said as well.
I think Middle England is the rest of the country, it's the whole country. It's the vast majority of people who want common sense, practical, centrist politics and policies to fix the things that need fixing, whether it's potholes or social care.
Well, if you're listening in Liverpool, Manchester, Glasgow, Dundee, Cardiff, Belfast, wherever, you probably wouldn't really think that Middle England is the whole country, or Islington, or Tower Hamlets.
Should they have done better? Is one of the untold headlines, Henry, that actually the Greens and the Lib Dems, they didn't bounce very hard on the trampoline?
I think the Lib Dems are pretty happy with how they did, actually. They are very happy with the psychological boost of coming ahead of the Conservatives in the projected national share. And that, I think, does say something. I think for them, the task here was for local government to catch up with national government, because basically what they were doing here was trying to win control of council areas where they evicted the Conservatives from the House of Commons back in July. Usually it's the other way around. The Lib Dems get a foothold at local government and then build up to national government. This was kind of that in reverse.
I tell you what is interesting about the Lib Dems, though, and they are very pleased with the gains that they made, but it is interesting to me that they are so overtly now going after former Tory places. They're sticking with that strategy. In days gone by, you would have seen the Lib Dems try to go in and clean up in areas that might have been Labour. They're not doing that in this era. Maybe that makes sense when Labour has got such an absolutely massive majority in the House of Commons. Maybe it makes sense because of the way the right has splintered and they are taking those sort of Cameroony kind of former, even Henley, Whitney, those kinds of places as sort of affluent, young, affluent people who they're trying to get away from the Tories, and they've had big successes with that. But it's interesting, their share actually went down. Their share in our projected national share, if it had been a general election, was the same as it was last year, and it was down on 2023. But I think that's in part a product of they've chosen very deliberately to do incredibly intense targeting. So they're not trying to win everywhere. They're ruthlessly trying to use their very successful targeting. But it is interesting, if we're talking about the big structure of politics, they're not going after Labour voters at the moment. They're really focused on Middle England with Ed David's birdsong and leafy backgrounds.
I love that. I asked, I know we're going now, I just thought I should tell you both, I asked Wes Streeting directly, would he stay as the candidate in Ilford North with his majority of 528?
Ooh, that was a good question to ask. What did he say?
He said yes. I suppose he couldn't have said no, but he didn't swither.
That's very interesting indeed.
It's very slim, isn't it? Squeaky.
Very, very squeaky. And yeah, some people might say that actually when it gets a bit closer to the general election, Wes Streeting might be one of the people who does the chicken run, as it's unkindly known, when prominent MPs end up doing a switcheroo and running in a different constituency because they're so worried about losing. But he's on the record now saying he's not going to do that.
Great film, Chicken Run.
Chicken Run 2 was rubbish, though.
Chicken Run 2, yeah, we didn't need Chicken Run 2. Although we did need Terminator 2. That was better in many ways than Terminator.
Oh, Back to the Future 2 is a great film.
Yeah.
Great film.
Is this a sign that we've ended?
Or we could carry on talking about movies, or we could all go home and go to bed.
No one will have got this far, so no one will know what we say now.
I don't know what I'm saying now.
Except, yeah, congratulations on broadcasting for 48 hours without breath
years.
or water. Henry, have a lovely weekend dreaming of Liverpool and Liverpool football.
Oh, you've moved your little man.
No, it's just cut off by the shot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you haven't mentioned it for weeks. So to you, getting through the election week, a new VE Day commemoration week begins, and we'll be back. Adam will be here bringing you the highlights of the news, and we'll be back next weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Newscast from the BBC.